अस्सलाम वालेकुम एवरीवन, वेलकम बैक टू माय चैनल। आज हम बात करेंगे माइस्थीनिया ग्रेविस के बारे में। Before going for the definition and etiology, we will first discuss the pathophysiology for the better understanding. For understanding the myasthenia gravis, we have to first discuss about the acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter of parasympathetic nervous system. It has two receptors, muscarinic receptors and nicotinic receptors. On muscarinic receptors, muscarine and acetylcholine will work. On nicotinic receptors, nicotine and acetylcholine will work. So nicotinic receptors are of two types, NM receptors and NN receptors. NM receptors are responsible for the muscle contraction. In myasthenia gravis, the NM receptors are involved. Autoantibodies are formed against these receptors. So definitely NM receptors are responsible for muscle contraction. So if they are affected, if the antibodies are formed against them, then definitely there will be muscle weakness. Let's proceed. So this is brain, this is spinal cord, and this is nerve coming supplying the muscle, and this part of the nerve, which is axon, it is magnified here, and this is muscle and plate, and this part here is synaptic cleft. First I will tell you how acetylcholine is made. So the choline, we take it from daily diet, and it is prepared from liver. It has the specific channels through which it enters into the axons, and in axons we have mitochondria from which we get the acetyl-CoA. So this acetyl-CoA and choline together makes the acetylcholine. Okay. So normally what happens for the acetylcholine, these are the acetylcholines and these are vesicles. Okay, in vesicles these are dots are acetylcholine, this is axon, and this white part is synaptic cleft, and this is muscle and plate. For the acetylcholine to release from the vesicles, we need the action potential. For the action potential, we have to generate it. Okay, now how the action potential will be generated? The sodium will move in, and then the depolarization will occur. When depolarization will occur, this depolarization will reach to the vesicles. Okay, and vesicles and axonal membrane, this is axonal membrane and this is vesicular membrane, they together fuses. I have shown it here, the fusion of vesicle with the axonal membrane. When it happens, at the same time calcium enters. Why calcium enters? Because there are voltage sensitive calcium channels are present here. When there is depolarization, there is more positivity, the voltage sensitive calcium channels will open and the calcium will enter, and there will be the fusion, and the axonal and vesicular membrane will break, and acetylcholine will be released in synaptic cleft as shown here. So after the acetylcholine is released, we have NM receptors here, this orange one, this is NM receptors. Okay, the NM receptor is pentavalent receptor. See, 1 2 3 4 5, and only two sites on NM receptors the acetylcholine will bind. This is known as bivalent binding, because on only two sites the acetylcholine will bind. When acetylcholine will bind here, this channel will open and sodium and potassium will come in the muscle. In muscle and plate, the sodium will cause the stimulation of other sodium channels and cause the sodium influx, and then the voltage gated calcium channels will become active, and calcium will cause the actin and myosin sliding in the sarcomere for the normal muscle contraction. This is how the normal muscle contraction takes place. So what happens in myasthenia gravis? In myasthenia gravis, the antibodies are formed against NM receptors. So when the antibodies will be formed against NM receptors, there will be decreased level of NM receptors on muscle and plate, and then ultimately there will be decreased muscle contraction, and then it will lead to weakness of muscle. 85% of cases the antibodies are made against NM receptors. In 15% of the cases, the antibodies are made against the MuSK proteins, which are responsible for making the NM receptors. So eventually, if the MuSK proteins are deficient, there will be decreased level of NM receptors because they are making NM receptors. So there will be decreased NM receptors in neuromuscular junction, and ultimately there will be decreased contraction of muscles, and there will be weakness of muscles.
So normally what happens that when acetylcholine is released from the axon terminal and it is in synaptic cleft, it is degraded by the acetylcholinesterase enzyme. Now in myasthenia gravis there is deficient NM receptors and excessive acetylcholine is present in the synaptic cleft because it has less NM receptors to bind with. So more of acetylcholine is present in synaptic cleft and it is present here for the long time. So normally for the acetylcholine there is two fate, either it is degraded by the acetylcholinesterase enzyme or it returns back to the axons. But in this case when acetylcholine is waiting here, more of the acetylcholine is degraded by the acetylcholinesterase enzymes, and so eventually the acetylcholine number will also start decreasing in case of myasthenia gravis.
Now I will discuss about the definition. As I have already told that in myasthenia gravis, the main site of attack is NM receptors. NM receptors are responsible for muscle contraction. How the muscle contracts, I have explained it in pathophysiology. So in 15% cases, the antibodies are made against the MuSK proteins, which are responsible for the formation of NM receptors, okay? And in 85% cases, NM receptors are involved. Antibodies are made against the NM receptors, okay? So it is immune mediated disorders. Why immune mediated disorder? Because antibodies are being made, characterized by formation of which antibodies? Anti-acetylcholine receptor antibodies. So what are acetylcholine receptors? NM receptors. ठीक है, तो antibodies are made against NM receptors, leading to an inhibition of neuromuscular transmission. If there will be no receptors, no binding of acetylcholine with the neuromuscular receptor, there will be no neuromuscular transmission. Okay, then what will be the result? The result will be there will be no muscle contraction, and this patient will present with easy fatigability. Okay, so in myasthenia gravis we will see that the patient will present like, डॉक्टर साहब मैं जब सुबह उठता हूँ बिल्कुल ठीक होता हूँ, लेकिन जैसे जैसे वक्त गुजरता है, दिन चढ़ता है, तो मैं थकावट महसूस करता हूँ. ओके.
Immune mediated disorder characterized by formation of anti-acetylcholine receptor antibodies leading to inhibition of neuromuscular transmission resulting in easy fatigability plus muscular weakness.